Welcome back, Ceramics 2. For your first lesson, you're going to be throwing a 6 to 8 inch pitcher like this. So you're going to need to learn and get comfortable throwing a taller cylinder than you did in level 1. So this video is to kind of review some of those cylinder skills, but also introduce a few new ones that will help you to throw taller so that you can get the height out of the right amount of clay. So in level 1, you started with 1 pound of clay. In level 2, I'm going to have you starting with 2 pounds of clay at least. If you want to try more, that's good. It's good to try throwing with a larger amount of clay and then scale yourself back down and be like, oh, that, now this 2 pounds feels easy because I've been throwing with 3. So you can kind of get yourself used to throwing with more clay. And then with less clay, try to get it thinner and have more control over it. So things that you're going to want to always have in level 2 is a sponge on a stick so you can get all the way down into your taller forms and clean out the bottom so we don't get any S-cracking. I also like to have a modeling tool or my beloved popsicle stick to do some of the shaping that I want and get myself some of the edges that I like while I'm doing this. But to get started, just like level 1, you're going to need to center. Depending on how skilled you were with level 1 centering, you're really going to want to focus on your coning technique and getting your coning to work so that you are continuing to wedge your clay after you've got your clay wedged. So remember, coning is actually wedging your clay. You're compressing those particles as it spins around. You've already done the spiral wedging with your clay and spun your particles hopefully tight, and now you go back with the coning and tighten the particle of the clay so that those little pieces of glass are sliding along each other and holding that clay and making it more plastic. So as you bend and twist that clay, it gets to be more plastic. So just a review of centering. Again, there's a million ways to center. The only wrong way is to not have your clay centered when you're done. But what I like to do is I like to have my left hand at 6 o'clock, my right hand at 12 o'clock, and I'm pressing in with my left hand, counter pressure with my right hand, coning that clay up into the center. Okay, so I like to think my left hand is doing most of the work. My right hand is doing the counter pressure, and of course always have your elbows braced either on your thighs or on the splash pan, on your arms on the splash pan. Once you get your cone, then you're going to make sure to compress. I use my left hand on top and force the clay downward and catch it with my right hand as it goes down. As I get to this like mushroom shape, I'm going to use my right hand to squish the clay back in to the center. So I'm spiraling that clay back into the center as I'm pressing it down, which is helping the clay to get more plastic. Okay, and then squishing that clay all the way down and making sure that the base of my clay is nice and even. Okay, now this is what your centered lump should look like, and it should be centered from the top all the way down to the bottom, and the bottom shouldn't feel bumpy at all. Okay, now as we start opening, as I use my index finger to open, remember you can use whatever you want. You can use your thumb, you can use your index fingers, combinations, but make sure to hold the outsides so that you're not bumping your centered clay off center as you open. Okay, so I'm going to open all the way down so that I've got my 1/4 inch floor. Remember, if you need it, use a needle tool to double check the thickness of your floor by turning your wheel off all the way and checking that thickness. Once I've got my clay open, I'm going to pull the floor out, which is where I'm going to hook my finger like this and gently pull. But when I'm pulling into both of my hands. You see a lot of people just pull into one hand like this, which works, but I like to pull into both hands and use my left hand to keep the center here so that my clay doesn't get knocked off center. I'm pulling this direction, but also making sure that the clay is centered against my hand. Okay? Once you open, compress your floor. It's going to be really really imperative in the level 2 that you compress your floor so that the clay doesn't get S cracks for your pitcher and for other forms that we'll be throwing later. So I'm going to compress that floor. And when you compress, you're really grabbing the clay from the side and pulling it back into the center. Okay, now that I'm done opening, I'm going to slow my wheel down just a bit because I've got more clay. And the more clay you have, the more centrifugal force you're going to have acting on that clay, wanting to rip the rim apart. Okay, so first pull, I've got this nice undercut right here. I've got a V undercut on the inside, so I can push this clay into the center. So just like level 1, left hand on the inside, right hand on the outside, and think of pulling that clay up into the center. If you always think pulling your clay into a trapezoid shape rather than straight walls, by the end, that trapezoid bends in and becomes straight walls. But if you try to pull straight walls right away, they tend to flare out and turn trapezoid the other way. All right, so I'm going to just press in and pinch with my fingers on the inside and the outside, grab that clay, and I'm using my right dominant hand to press the clay inward as I pull the clay upward. Pull all the way past the rim and then release your hands. Now you can see this nice trapezoid shape I've got. This trapezoid will end up being straight walls, but for now we want to keep it a trapezoid. Compress the rim. That trapezoid helps buttress the clay walls on the top all the way down to the base and helps the clay from cracking and getting overworked at the bottom. Okay, now I'm going to lubricate the inside with a little water. I'm going to slow my wheel down just a little bit again because I've got so much clay here. Okay, I'm going to slow my wheel down. Now one trick from level 1, don't forget you take your thumb, and if you just compress that clay down at the bottom and leave yourself a little finger ridge there, you can get your start on your pull and you've compressed that clay a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to press in again using my middle finger to press the clay in and then grab from the inside and pinch that clay as I push up, and I'm thinking I'm pushing into the center as I do this and trying to keep my walls more trapezoidy rather than straight up. Okay, so see that trapezoid has now become a little bit more straight walled. So I'm going to just take my clay and I'm going to collar it. I'm going to grab all the way down at the base and collar all the way up and keep my clay kind of trapezoidy. Okay, so I've kind of maintained that trapezoid shape all the way up. Okay, now I'm going to compress the rim one more time just to keep it nice. You always want to make sure you have a nice rim so that when you mess with your clay later, you've got a nice something to mess with. Okay, now I'm going to compress that clay at the bottom again to keep it centered. I'm going to pull one more time. Again, thinking ahead, trapezoid, trapezoid, trapezoid. Okay, now I'm going to press in and lift up. And my trapezoid is becoming more vertical. Now as soon as I can get my hands together, I'm going to connect my hands, reposition my sponge to a fresh spot and continue pulling. And get that all the way past the rim. And there we've got a taller cylinder. Okay? Now, I'm going to compress this rim. And on the inside, you can't see it, but I can. There's a big pool of water. So even though I'm not done yet, I'm going to take my sponge on a stick and I'm going to swipe the bottom. And as I swipe the bottom, I'm going to kind of press down and compress the clay just a bit because I want to get out the water and I want to compress that clay so that it doesn't get cracked. Now, this is the point at which a lot of kids will be like, well, Mr. Lundgren, I've got this piece here pretty good, but this base still has a thickness of clay in it, and I can't get that last thickness out. So what you can do is you can collar. If you collar just with the bottom part of your hand and your pinky on each side, you can kind of press that clay in. So I'm just going to grab with the base, turn a little bit so you can see the side. I'm going to press that clay in at the base. Gently, slowly pressing that clay in. Okay, and you can see I've formed this ridge right down here. Now I did kind of knock the top off center just a bit, so I'm gonna just grab the top and make sure it stays on center. Now I've got this nice ridge on here, and if you could reach in and feel, there's now a big ledge on the inside where I've pressed that clay into. And I've done two things. I've brought that clay back into the center at the bottom, and I've left myself a really nice ridge to grab on here. Okay, so I'm gonna slow my wheel down just a bit again. Notice I'm paying full attention to how fast my wheel is going. You don't ever want your wheel to be going too fast for pulling taller walls. Slower is always better. Not too slow, obviously, but now I'm gonna grab this ridge from the inside. I'm gonna pinch and bring the clay over my middle finger on the outside. Now I've got that huge lump of clay that I'm able to bring up. Now, my hands are getting a little bit unsure, so I'm gonna release the clay. Mid-pull, I've released, so I can reposition my hands, get my sponge re-wet. I'm gonna try to connect my hands together, grab mid-pull, and bring the rest of that clay up. You can always stop mid-pull if you need to, and reposition and re-wet your hands as long as you start again with that same place and re-pulling that clay. Okay. Now, I've got this pretty good as far as the thinness on the outside and the inside and the like consistency of the clay. So at this point, I'm going to compress my rim one more time, keep it nice and solid. Then, last thing that's really important for level 2, we've taken all those clay particles and squished them all out. About every 3 to 4 pulls, you want to take what's called a down pull and compress those particles back together. So I'm going to hold my hand straight and bring the rib downward on the clay so that I can press those particles and I keep the wall straight. Okay, so I'm really just compressing the clay, just like we would compress the clay when we're doing the floor or something else. Okay, I'm compressing that clay back down. Okay, just like that. Now, this is the point at which, if I were making a picture or something else, I would start to mess with the shape. Okay, but this shape right here is about 9 inches tall. All right, and so you want to try to get 7 inches if you can. Now, at this point, you'd make sure again that the inside is super dry before you start closing it off and doing the shaping. So now I'm at the point where I would be throwing with intention. I've got a little extra clay here that I've left to pull it out, or I've got a little extra clay at the bottom because I know I'm going to trim it away or whatever. And you've got your nice cylinder that's under control all the way to the top, ready to go. All right. Now for cutting this off, just like anything else that you would do, you would turn your wheel off, water on the wheel head, and then you would slice underneath, take it off after you've got your shaping done. But this is how you want your clay to look at the end. You want it to be nice and tall, and you want it thin-walled on the bottom. Okay, so if I slice through this and give you the cross-section view, it's looking like that. Nice and consistent all the way up. A little bit, yeah, that's about right on the bottom. But you do have to leave yourself a little bit of clay down here so that it can support the walls above it. But you want to have a nice, even, and consistent wall. Okay, so a couple of those tricks: collaring at the bottom, stopping mid-pull as you pull to reposition yourself and get your hands wet. So in level 2, for the first week of class, we're just going to be reviewing our pulling techniques, reviewing our centering techniques, and trying to get you to the point of getting that clay as tall as possible before you start shaping your pictures. Thanks for joining me. See you in class.